Good morning. Well, I have watched the movie The Ten Commandments on TV nearly every year of my life. For those of you who don't know, it comes on ABC every year, right around Easter time, so you can do the same thing if you like. Therefore, for me, Moses is Charlton Heston. And there is nothing that you can say to convince me otherwise. And of course, one of the most important and most really pivotal scenes in the entire movie depicts what we just heard R.W. read. And he sounds like God when he reads, doesn't he? How appropriate that he reads today. But it's such a pivotal scene in that movie. Now, by today's standards, the special effects in the Ten Commandments leave a lot to be desired, all right? If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It was filmed 65 years ago, so we'll forgive them for that. But it's a powerful scene, nonetheless. Not powerful because of Charlton Heston or Cecil B. DeMille or any of that, but it's powerful because this is one of the most compelling stories in all of the Bible. More than that, this is really a watershed event in all of human history, Exodus chapter 3, Moses and the burning bush. It's an example of what we would call a theophany. That's essentially just a $10 word to describe a personal encounter between an encounter between a human being and God, and an encounter in a very tangible, visible form, in this case, a burning bush. As we continue our study today of Mike Slaughter's book, Dare to Dream, we see that Slaughter suggests that every one of us, that you and I, will have our own burning bush experience in our lives. Indeed, Slaughter would say we have to, if we hope to live out the dream that God has in mind for us. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about that today, but before I do, I want to just look a little bit more at Moses and what's going on in this story. It says that Moses is keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, and he is led beyond the wilderness to Mount Horeb, and that's where he notices this bush that is on fire. The Bible doesn't really go into any detail as to the shrub or what type it is or how big it is or any of that. It just simply says that the bush is blazing, yet it's not consumed. It just keeps on burning continually. Now, Jewish scholars, Jewish rabbis in particular, have had a field day with this story for centuries. The Jewish rabbis have asked questions like, how long had that bush been burning before Moses saw it? If it wasn't consumed by the flames, was it just starting to burn when Moses arrived, or had it been burning for a little while before that? Was it burning for an hour before Moses arrived, or was it burning several hours before he arrived? Was it burning all day? Was it burning all week or even longer? These are the kind of things that biblical scholars and theologians get to sit around and think about all day long. Movies, when they depict this scene from the Bible, they will often show Moses sort of leaving his flock behind and walking up the mountain by himself, kind of stumbling upon this burning bush. In fact, that's exactly how the Ten Commandments movie and other movies show it. But that's not really how the scripture that we just heard read, that's not really how it shows it happening at all. In the Bible, you can go and read it in your bulletin today. It just simply says Moses led the flock to the mountain, and there an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame out of the bush. So for all we know, Moses could have been by that area, could have been by that same bush before. This is what the rabbis wonder. Maybe he was even by that bush many times Perhaps, as the rabbis speculate, that bush had been burning for quite some time, and Moses just never saw it. He never paid attention to it because he was so caught up in all the other things going on in his life, his flock, just everything else. Maybe he just never really took notice of what was going on around him. We've been there before. I have. Or maybe something else was going on. Maybe God just knew that Moses wasn't ready to see or to notice this bush because of the blinders, the self-made blinders that Moses had put up to keep him from really paying attention to his surroundings. And so God just waited until that day to ignite and to speak to Moses from the burning bush, because then God knew that Moses was finally ready to listen and to see. Whatever the case, Moses saw the burning bush that day. He saw it because he turned aside to pay attention. And those were Moses' words. Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why this bush has not burned up. Then it says just a few seconds later in Exodus, it says, when the Lord saw that Moses had turned aside to see, God spoke to him out of the bush. So turning aside is the key here. The Hebrew word for turn aside is actually a word that's in the Old Testament a lot. You see that word in there a good bit. And most often when that word is used in the Old Testament, it's actually translated differently. It's actually not translated normally as turn aside. Usually it's translated as to remove or to be removed. So we could actually sort of rewrite these couple of lines, and it could actually say this: Moses removed himself, or Moses removed his mind. He removed his thoughts temporarily from his current situation. He removed his mind from the stresses and the anxieties and his duties. He removed his thoughts from being Jethro's son-in-law and from being Jethro's flock tender for a while. He removed the blinders that he had put up that kept him from having a clear vision for his life. And once he did that, once he removed himself, once he turned aside from all those things that kept him busy, that's when Moses was able to hear God's voice. God had been ready to speak to Moses all along, but it wasn't until Moses did that he could hear God speak. And this is what Mike Slaughter is trying to help us see in his book, Dare to Dream, that we so often are just like Moses. We must be fully present to God in order to hear God's voice. Think about it. How often have we been right in the presence of God, really within earshot of God, so to speak? A theophany ready to happen. But we missed it. We missed that theophany because we were so enthralled in our life, making money, doing our job, climbing a ladder, whether it was a career ladder or a social ladder, just chasing after our own personal interests, and we missed it. The truth is, had we removed ourselves, had we turned aside from some of those things, there was a good chance we may have seen and heard God a little bit more in our life. Good news is, of course, is that we can still do this. It's never too late, no matter who we are, no matter our life circumstance, no matter how old we are, it doesn't matter. We can still turn aside, and we can still seek and listen to God's voice. I appreciated very much Slaughter's words from chapter 3 of his book when he expressed very much the same experiences that I have had when it comes to a burning bush. Going back to many years ago when I was feeling a call into ordained ministry, people would sometimes ask me to describe my call, what it was like. And I know that when people would ask me this, at least some people, they would ask me, really what they wanted to hear was that I had an experience like Moses. They really were hoping that I would describe that I heard a literal voice from God. And I know that they were disappointed. I could see it in their face when I would tell them, I'm sorry, but I didn't really have a burning bush experience like Moses. I didn't hear a voice speaking to me. For me, it was more like what Slaughter describes in this chapter. For me, my burning bush experience was really a series of stages. First, of life building, of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And then it was a stage of disillusionment. And then it was more seeking and learning until I eventually reached this fire that wouldn't burn out. I realized that there was a lot more to life than just pursuing things to make me happy, because there would never be enough of that. What created a fire that didn't burn out were the things that not only brought me joy, but as Slaughter reminds us, they were things that blessed others and also blessed God. But it took me years to really discern that. I didn't just figure that out in one day, in one experience. So when Slaughter suggests in his book, as he does in this chapter, that everybody should have a burning bush experience, please don't take that to mean that every one of us should have their own theophany, that everyone should hear the literal voice of God. If you have had one of those experiences, that's wonderful. In fact, if you've had one of those experiences, I'd like to hear about it. But for most of us, our burning bush experience will be more of a slow burn. But that's still God speaking to us. That's still us listening to God. It's still God showing us what our ultimate purpose in life is. And the truth is that there are burning bushes all around and about us that we probably have passed by dozens, maybe hundreds of times. And we've just never noticed or seen them because we've been busy living our life. And we haven't taken the time to remove ourselves or to turn aside and pay attention. There are people who need help, and we've missed it. There are people who are lonely, and we've walked by them. There's systems that need changing, and we just haven't seen it. God called Moses to lead Israel, to lead the Israelite people to freedom from their oppressors in Egypt. That was God's ultimate purpose for Moses in his life. Our purpose may not be quite that big, but God has a purpose for each one of us. And you know what? It might be big. Your purpose might be really big. Knowing that purpose and the work of bringing God's kingdom on earth happens when we are intentional in spending time with God, to hear God speak to us and to hear God reveal to us our burning bush, the thing that creates a fire in us that will not burn out. The thing, again, as Slaughter says, that not only brings us joy, but also blesses others and blesses God. Our challenge today, our challenge every day, is to turn aside and to remove ourselves long enough to listen and to determine what God would have us do with our life, our ordinary life. I love how the poet Mary Oliver puts it in her beautiful poem, The Summer Day. Familiar words to a lot of us when she says, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Well, that is your burning bush. And thanks be to God, every one of us has one. Amen.